Good afternoon on what is a bright, breezy and chilly day. It is Tuesday, November the 2nd. I am back in the reading nook with a cat who is not ours and a nice hot cup of tea. And of course, I have something interesting to talk about, which is Talisman Adventures, Tales of the Realm, Curse of the Rat Queen, which was a release for Free RPG Day. That took place on Saturday the 16th of October, and I hope you've got a local friendly gaming store who was participating and you were able to get along and grab at least one or more of the many interesting titles which were available on the day. And even if you haven't got a friendly local gaming store, I hope you've got a friendly gaming store that you can patronise and make purchases from, because they're really useful. They usually do good mail order service and they've got a good stock in. For example, Fanboy 3 in Manchester, and I mention them specifically because they were able to provide me with this Free RPG Day title and all of the other titles in these videos. And I want to thank David Salisbury in particular and his staff for their time in bundling these up and sending to them. It's very generous of them and I do appreciate it. Anyway, so Talisman Adventures, Tales of the Realm, Curse of the Rat Queen. Now it's published by Pegasus Press, the German publisher, and it's actually based upon the board game originally published by Board People Games Workshop. And it's another example of essentially, normally what happens is role-playing games get board games. For example, Exalted has its own board game. Ars Magica has Grand Tribunal, and basically on Trinity, or Continuing Trinity, essentially has its own battle game, miniatures combat game. But there's been a trend of the other way. So Talisman now has Talisman Adventures. Root, the board game, now has its own role-playing game, and so does Zombicide Chronicles, for which there was another Free RPG Day release, and so again for the Root role-playing game. But this one, Tales of the Realm, Curse of the Rat Queen. Prepare for daring quests and mighty deeds in Curse of the Rat Queen, the 2021 Free RPG Day adventure for the Talisman Adventures fantasy role-playing game. This tale of betrayal and greed takes the heroes from a remote village filled with secrets to ancient ruins deep within a foreboding forest. Rats are in every shadows, but are they true monsters of the tale? This booklet has everything you need to start playing, including a condensed rule set and 4 pre-generated player characters. The adventure itself teaches additional rules as needed while the tale unfolds, making it ideal for both novice and veteran players to learn the Talisman Adventures game system. So let's find out what's inside. So we've got a great cover. Basically, that is a kind of like a classic pose in role-playing art. Essentially, 4 stalwart heroes atop a pedestal or some kind of promontory with the enemy, whether it's the undead horde or rats or orcs or something, just coming up from below, and they've got to try and survive. It's a nice piece of artwork, but as I say, it is a cliche. I'm not saying it's not a bad cliche, but it's a cliche. So open up. Okay, so what we've got inside is an abbreviated rule set for the game to get you going, and it's basically we introduce other rules when they needed in place. There's a little bit of programmed learning in there, 4 player characters, and the adventure. And there's an explanation of what it is. It's set in the world of Talisman, the magical quest game. Okay. Essentially, it says, with this role-playing game, you explore the world of Talisman in new ways, creating your own characters and telling your own stories. The game board has been set aside and replaced by your imagination. What you're going to need is some 6-sided dice in 2 different colours, 4 per person. And essentially, one of them needs to be a different colour. So we get into the basics of the game and rolling dice. And it uses the 3d6 adventure system to resolve tests, and then if the number equals or exceeds the difficulty of the test, it succeeds. One of the 3 dice must be different from the other die. It's different in colour at least or size, and it's called the Kismet dice. And essentially, if it rolls a 1 or a 6, it has basically different impact. So it's not dissimilar to other rule sets, I suppose. I mean, whether that is the age system, or we go back to sort of like the icon system for the last unicorn version of Star Trek, or other dice pool systems like Shadowrun. So we very quickly explanation of the rules, movement, combat, character actions, what they can do in combat. It's nice and clean laid out. There's a fair bit of text to read through. So anyone, you've got to do a bit of preparation. You can't just pick up this and play. And then we're dealing with enemy actions, and such as defense tested, damage, armor, and things like that. Get a nice bit of artwork. Before we get into essentially attributes and aspects, so essentially you've got two attributes, strength and craft, and they're broken down into brawn, agility, metal, craft, insight, wits, and resolve. So a little bit like the you can see where it's derived from the board game. It's a long time since I've played it. And then we have how you use skills, and what's interesting is that there's an explanation in there of how you use skills with particular attributes and aspects. So artisan, you might be used for blacksmithing or large woodworking projects, agility for making delicate works, insight to understand the underlying meaning behind a work of art or create something truly inspiring. So then we go into Let's Play, and we have strange the characters. We've got a troll warrior, followed by a dwarf priest. He's got spells, of course, and then elf scout, and lastly, ghoul assassin. That's a ghoul who is an assassin, not an assassin of ghouls. So that's an interesting option. And then we get to the adventure itself. And essentially it starts off within the village at Jellicoe, and they've got a message to come to the village, and they've never been there, and then they have a barroom brawl. Now the barroom brawl, again, there's another cliche. It's with the locals, and essentially it's there to showcase how the rules work for the benefit of the players. Make us a few skill tests, get them used to rolling the dice, and so on. It's just against tavern toughs. Then they're asked, basically, they're contacted by the Elders' Hall, and they basically get the gist of what they've got to do. Essentially, the village is plagued by thousands of rats almost overnight, and essentially the Elders have heard tales of the Piper and paid in full for the service, and essentially, basically it worked, and all the rats went off to the nearby Whispering Woods, but now they're coming back, so they want someone else to deal with it, not a Pied Piper. So let's go into the woods, where they're encountering ruins and rats, and entering the Rat Queen's lair, and so on. And discovering what's going on. So we have monsters at the end, of course. We've got apparitions, giant rats, goblins. We've got Lovis the Sprite Piper. I wonder how he's involved. We've got Plague Rat, rat hordes, and serpents, vampire bats, wild boars, and more. And then, of course, there's a bit of you've got a bit of advertising on the back, which is basically the core rule book, Talisman Adventures, Tales of the Dungeon, basically Adventures accessory pack, and Game Master's kit. So, basically everything you need to pick up after you've tried this out, or if you pick this up and essentially, what you need to play using characters of your own, the player's own design. Because that's the other option, and essentially you could use that as a Kickstarter campaign with your core rules if you wanted to. So yeah, that looks quite nice. I'm quite impressed by that. It's the idea that you can play a ghoul is interesting, and the adverts sort of mention that, you know, in the Tales of the Dungeon you can play a vampire, minotaur, tomb raider, necromancer, and so on. And typically they're not character types that you can play in a role-playing game, because essentially they're mostly seen as evil. But if you go back to the board game, they're characters whose fate you can control as you go around the standard board, let alone all the expansions. So, you know, each of them is slightly different, and they all add different powers and abilities and add variety to the board game. And of course, with the addition of the Dungeons book and the core rule book, you've got plenty to choose from. So that is Talisman Adventures, Tales of the Realm, Curse of the Rat Queen, released for Free RPG Day. I hope you've enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, please do click the like button down below. And if you've got any comments or feedback, appreciate you taking the time to post those, and I do read them. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings here in the Nook, whether of a normal game or book, which I'll unbox, or a release for Free RPG Day, which, whatever it is, I will talk about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all accompanied, of course, by a nice hot cup of tea. And because he wants a warm lap, the cat, who is not ours, who's a lovely boy, then please do hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another unboxing in the Nook. Bye for now.